evening and welcome to Tinkering with Edkelar. In the previous episode, I started the restoration process of the Perpetuum Ebner Musical 5V, a portable turntable of the Tube era. I finally got the last parts needed to button up the project. So, here we go! Let's start off with the motor issue. I still don't quite know why the resistor is 2.5 kilo ohms, but I did try some combinations. No resistor at all, and then larger and smaller values. Turns out that using 100 ohms makes the motor run fine, while almost not heating up the resistor at all. Lower values and the motor wouldn't run, higher values and it would almost burn up. I can still change it if anybody out there has any idea on the why. Of course, I also got new belts and a dash of fresh oil. The belt assembly is used to implement the different speeds: 78, 45, 33 and 16, which is all of them. I need to find some records to test these. Now to the player. Removing the arm is a problem in itself. The pivot pin is, at the same time, the force adjustment, and it took some prying to get it moving. Tiny mechanics and even a slight amount of rust don't go together all that well. The counterweight is located inside the player and also almost fused to the connecting rod with rust. After lots of poking and prodding, again, I finally got the arm off and can move to the pivot assembly. There is a tangle of levers and some springs that connect several cams. Just getting everything apart took some time, all the while making sure to take enough pictures. Oh look, there's an open ball bearing for the platter hiding behind all that grime. Darn, I have no idea how many of these tiny balls I lost so far. Some of the connection rods are riveted, so they stay together. The main actuator cam was also very hard to remove. In this case it wasn't rust, but the surface of the axle getting marred up with the set screws. The base of the player as well as the platter are painted with golden hammer tone paint. It looked okay, but was flaking off in some spots due to small rust patches. I found a can on Amazon, so here goes nothing. Thankfully, the rubber base of the platter came off without a fight. Cleaning up all the guts took ages. I used the Dremel wire brush against the rusty parts and wiped everything down with alcohol. And there were lots of parts. The arm of the player has a little nose on the side that is important for the changer mechanism, but broken off on mine. It is supposed to measure 24 mm bottom to top, but is about 10 mm short. Since the diameter is only 2 mm, I need to reinforce it with a bit of steel. Drilling a 1 mm hole in a 2 mm peg at an odd angle is not easy. In the meantime, let's look at the case. One word to summarize the condition: meh. I've seen worse, but it has discolorations and a few scuff marks. Not what I'd like to see in a restored product. So, off with the cover! The outside is a darkish green, which came off in almost one piece. That was nice. The insides were mostly a brighter tone, and that stuff stuck like there's no tomorrow. At most I could get off half a fingernail at a time. The hardware was nailed to the case, with the nails bent over on the inside. I still couldn't find those weird split-in-half nails they used back then, so I decided to use nuts and bolts instead. Electroplating the hardware was my first thought, but I couldn't find the type to create that golden color, so I decided to paint them instead. I know, it will rub off on parts and it will scratch easily, but at least it will be mostly fine. And since I used screws, I can go back and clean or plate them later if I find something proper. But keeping the rust puck marked style, no way. I was this close to calling it quits with the light colored cover and just glue over it when I thought, could heat help? And yes, even my hairdryer, at high setting, did a good job. The cover came off in long scrapes when heated. A bit hard on the fingertips though. Ouch. Another order on Amazon later, I have a few sheets of fall leather fabric in a, close enough color. Cutting off a bit for the amp cover panel. Spray glue and lots of pushing, bending, stretching and masking tape later, I have that panel covered. The shells present a challenge. The corners are rounded in all directions. It took quite some stretching, tucking, and at the same time locking them down for the glue to dry. The trim plastic strips were a good help to do that. After the corners have properly dried, I can trim them to the groove of the trim plastic and add the outside segments. Those are much easier because they are simple rectangles wrapped around. The case had a total of 9 brown rubber feet, which looked pretty worn out. I replaced them with new black ones of similar size. The hardware on the outside needs to be set before the inner lining. The order of operations is crucial here. I drilled out the holes left by the original nails on the inside to countersink the nuts. This is good for everything except the carry handle, which needs to carry more than its own weight, literally. For those I use these push-in nuts. I think that's what they are called. After putting all the hardware bolts in, I finalized the interior. And put on the trim on the lid. For some reason the bottom doesn't have that. It is a plastic strip that clamps down on the case like a gasket. It is a very tight fit and I had to help the leather along with a screwdriver and promptly stabbed myself when I slipped. Putting the player mechanism back together again was yet another challenge. I started off with the delicate arm that triggers the end of record sequence. It is moved with the stylus, so it has to be extremely light on the movement. Removing the rust and adding a dab of oil surely helped. The arm linkage is up next. There is a slip clutch in there so that the automatic changer can detect the record diameter and set the arm down no matter how mixed and matched your stack is. Nifty! Bringing the main control levers together again and adding the cam. Now to attach the arm again. It might have been easier to connect the parts away from the base plate and then attach them to the hub, but not by much, and the really hard part is the weight adjustment later. The pickup has a lever attached that is marked M and N. It flips the cartridge between two positions. Turns out that is to put one of the two stylus tips in alignment with the record, normal and microgroove, that is 78 RPM shellacs and modern records. With other players you would need two different needles. Here we have one and a switch. Nifty! Cleaning up the pickup next. Again, lots of grime and oxidation in that. The springs for the flip mechanism also double as contacts for the electrical connection, so I make sure that they are shiny and clean. Now to the arm. The downforce adjustment is achieved with a spring that lifts up the arm by turning an adjustment screw on the side. But to fix the setting, you have to tighten down a set screw at the same time. This is way too fiddly. Because the spring is quite strong, the thumb screw is tiny and digs into your fingertips, while at the same time trying to secure a tiny screw with all the parts moving around. I had to improvise a bit. The adjustment guide says to set the force to 10 grams on the 5th record. I think I'm close enough. Adjusting the end of record lever was difficult, mostly because I had no idea how it was supposed to work. But after mulling over it for some time, I had a light bulb moment. That pointy edge isn't just cut at an angle, it is actually an arc. When the lever is getting close to the tripwire on the platter, that wire can push the lever back outside if it is moving slow enough. Only if it moves more than about 0.5 mm in one revolution, the tripwire will be outside the point and thus trip the record end. This is why the runout groove is so steep and why this one doesn't depend on precise sizes of records like all the new cheap players. Measuring 0.5 mm without touching either side was, well, let's say it involved lots of colorful words. And now the test. I use an old don't care much record for that, and indeed, it works. All that's left to do is to fit that thing into the case again. The start button was missing, so another OpenSCAD session, some 3D printing and painting later, I have a new one. Now that the arm is adjusted properly, I put in a new stylus and I can finally play a record for quality assessment.
Keepers can feel me rise and shine.
Sounds good to me. Of course it is mono and nowhere near to what we call hi-fi these days, but it does sound alright. There is still a bit more to do here. First, the axle and weight for the changing mechanism are nowhere to be found. I have to remake those eventually. Then I can also tune the changer levers and glue the missing part on the arm. But everything is prepared and should come together without much disassembly now. I can also elaborate on the exact mechanics then. So that's it for now. I hope you enjoyed this restoration. See you next time! I finally got the last parts in the bottom to nope, not gonna go there.